Elden Ring is the best game ever made. Elden Ring is a pretty good game, and it has recently received a substantial DLC. Now, this was the basis for my first ever video, at which point it was the first time I had played a Souls-like. Since then I've played Bloodborne, but I kinda sucked at that, so I'd still call myself a beginner when it comes to these games. The base game of Elden Ring had one of the most interesting and in-depth worlds I'd ever experienced. So how can the DLC compare? Will there be great towering architecture and beautiful vistas, or will there be 17 more Crucible Knights and ulcerated tree spirits? All the footage I show in this video came from my first 6 hours of playtime, which is funny because that's not even like the first quarter of the DLC. I show footage of and talk about the first 2 main bosses, but I'll give an on-screen warning before I do so. And there will be no story spoilers, mainly because I genuinely have no clue what is going on. Now first, let's talk about the map. For me, this was the best thing about the base game, a huge, beautiful open world with minimal restrictions and secrets to find. I thought it was the perfect answer to the easy mode debate, as it meant you could make the game as hard as you wanted it to be, based on how thoroughly you wanted to explore the world. The DLC takes us to a whole new realm, and let me tell you, this new area is definitely on par with the base game. The best way I can describe the layout is this painting of the 9 circles of hell. Except there's only like 5 circles. And the first circle has a piss waterfall. You're going to see entire new areas above you and below you. The way to reach them isn't all that obvious, so you're going to have to explore thoroughly, which again feels like the main mechanic of this game. A lot of trust is being put into the player from the developers to take your time and pay attention to your surroundings. You have these large-scale and beautiful dungeons hidden in tiny mouse-hole cave openings with no signs, no billboards, nothing. It's the same risky move that made the base game so great for me and many others, but if it didn't click for you before, it probably won't now. It also feels far more non-linear. If you look at the base game map, you can see a sort of direct route where you have to go, but the DLC is more of a big circle, and I can't really show the map without spoiling it, so this is my drawing of it. You start like here. The piss waterfall's real, by the way, it's over here. It can feel a bit more overwhelming, but personally, I really like this newish approach. It feels almost like a puzzle, and it's very exciting when you find your way into a new area. Though I would have liked it if there was a bit more thinking required, I guess, on how to get to these new areas, because most of the time you'll just stumble into it by accident, by going through a cave that I would have never thought would lead anywhere. It feels like they're rewarding being thorough rather than any problem solving, which is fine for me because I like exploring, but maybe a little frustrating for others. But also in the more linear parts like the main cities and dungeons, it pays to be thorough and patient. There's so many routes and items to find, most of which are completely worthless, but I'll get to that. You gotta look around corners so you don't get jumped by a goblin or something. These games are sneaky, but once you know their tricks, you feel pretty cool. Like, I know there's gonna be 2 enemies with flamethrowers hiding behind the doorway, so I'm gonna preemptively dodge. Huh. Though in some ways I thought the base game suffered a bit from the pure size of the map, mainly in the form of reused bosses. Now it makes sense, right? The base game had over 200 bosses. If all of them were unique, the game would still be in development, so stumbling across the 10th ulcerated tree spirit was, you know, it was a compromise for how big the game was. But the problem was when this trend spread to the main bosses, the ones with cutscenes that give you an achievement for beating them. Even they weren't safe. And it made a lot of my favourite fights feel, you know, a little less special. Now, one of my favourite bosses in the base game was Godric the Grafted. He has cool music, a challenging but fair moveset, and a dragon for a hand. Very memorable fight. So imagine my shock when 20 hours later I see Godfroy the Grafted, and it's just Godric with a moustache, and I think, okay game, you're taking the piss, and putting it in the piss waterfall. Like, imagine you've just fought Gehrman the first hunter in Bloodborne. Great fight, one of the best, and then 2 hours later you find Berman, the worst hunter. It's going to make that first encounter feel far less special. Of the 30 bosses in Elden Ring that will net you an achievement, 22 of them appear more than once. That's pretty bad. So what's the situation like in the DLC? Well, at first I wasn't positive. One of the first enemies you see is this cool furnace golem. I saw it in the trailer. I approached excited for a fight, but I was surprised that this guy didn't even have a boss health bar, had only like 2 moves, and after it stomped me I saw 2 more from the first area. In total there's like 6. Every new area you go to, he's there. He's past this cliff, and there's a... Oh shit, there's one in London! Oh my god, they hit the Big Ben! They hit the fucking Big Ben! Turn on TV, it doesn't matter what channel. Basically, I was worried that we were gonna get the same situation as the base game. But I'm happy to say that that is not the case. There are new standard enemies that are really cool. There are some who made it over from the base game, and unfortunately they're all my least favourite ones, like the hands. No one asked for these, and the bosses are definitely some of my favourites. The first one most people will fight is the Divine Beast Dancing Lion, which is like this puppet guy with really unique music and some of the coolest looking moves you'll ever see. Absolute banger. And then there's Rallana, sister of Renala. She is just stanced up 24/7 with 2 big swords, imbued with magic and fire. She's so cool and like 10 feet tall. And those are just the first 2 main bosses. There's like 10 in total, and they are just as good. So we get fewer repeats, which is great. But I don't know, maybe I just haven't found them yet. Maybe I'll stumble into a pit with the Sublime Beast singing Bison, who knows. It's definitely better though. Now, before anyone can experience this new world, we have to get there. Now, this has been a big source of discussion for a while now. To reach the DLC, you have to defeat Mohg. No, not that Mohg. You need to defeat Mohg, the Lord of Blood. That's Mohg the Omen. Wrong Mohg. Idiot. Now, this is troublesome because Mohg, no, not Mohg, Mohg, is one of the last bosses you fight in the base game. Judging by the amount of runes he drops, this is the 3rd to last guy you fight, just behind the wicked bitch Malenia and the final boss. By the time you fight Mohg, you're going to be like 75% the way through the game, and by the time you fight Mohg, you're going to be like 90% the way through the game. And this game is like 100 hours long. Locking every aspect of the DLC behind one of the hardest bosses is definitely a choice, but it's also one of the hardest and most cryptic bosses to actually reach. To get to the area to fight him, you have to find a random well in the corner of this huge city and go through this maze of sewers to fight. Wait, no, that's the wrong Mohg, hold on. To get to the real Mohg, you need to find this little teleporter in this vast snowfield, or complete this random quest line. Most people will need to look at a guide just to find him. And then after all that, you need to go through Mohgwyn Palace and get a Mohg win. No, not a Mohg Gwyn, a Mohg win. See, this is a bit confusing. He's a really hard boss as well, and all of this makes getting to the DLC very troublesome. It makes sense thematically, of course, and based on the story behind the new world, this is the only place it could be, but I can still be a little disappointed by this. All the cool new weapons and bosses just can't be accessed until basically the end of the game. Like, I'd see these claw weapons and think, I know, I'm going to create a new character, it's going to be Beast from X-Men, and I'm going to leap at enemies and rip off their arms, only to realise I'd have to go through the entire game to get there. If I was the man in charge, I'd maybe make the first area of the DLC accessible earlier on in the game and leave the rest for Mohg. Though I do understand why it is this way, it's still a little sad. But look, that's just a me thing. I'm sure everyone else is enjoying the DLC. I played the DLC for like 4 hours straight when I first got it, and I was like, it's brilliant. It's more of the same, which is a good thing. And then I look at the reviews and I see they're mixed on Steam, and that surprised me a lot. Now, some of the complaints are around the performance, and they're absolutely right. The performance is like when the base game originally came out, very inconsistent, not smooth at all, and hopefully that changes. But the majority of the complaints are that the DLC is too hard. Now, I'd like to get this out of the way. The DLC is very hard, harder than the base game. But do I think it's too hard? Nah. Though I think I understand why people are saying this. We've known for a while now that the point at which we would enter the DLC is after killing Mohg. That's given a lot of people time to prepare, and I think there's been an idea that they're going to be overpowered for the DLC. Like, I've got maximum upgraded weapons and all the flasks and all the best talismans, and I've leveled up 30 times by slaughtering the grey aliens. Maybe there was the thought that they could just clean house with every enemy in the new realm, but that is not the case. Mainly because your level doesn't really matter for this new area. What matters is the 2 new mechanics, the Erdtree blessing and the revered Spirit Ash blessing. I'm pretty sure we didn't know about these before the DLC came out, so I guess it came as a bit of a surprise to everyone. It's basically the new leveling system for the DLC zone only. And it's smart, as it means you can bring everyone onto a level playing field. The guy who beat Mohg by the skin of their teeth and the guy who beat him into a fine mist are just as powerful as each other in the DLC. And I guess people weren't expecting to be challenged, which is kind of funny considering the game they're playing, but I don't judge. The people expecting to steamroll the new area are trying to rush through it, disregarding just how important these 2 new mechanics are. They are damn near necessary. A single level in the Erdtree blessing increases the damage you deal by about 5% and reduces the damage you take by a similar amount. and this has a maximum level of 20, meaning if you max it out, you are dealing double the damage and taking half the damage from when you started the DLC. And the Revered Spirit Ash does the same thing but for your summons. Even if you don't know anything about the game, you probably realize just how big a deal that is. The bosses are balanced based on the idea that you will have been leveling up these 2 new mechanics, so when the guy expecting to beat everything to a pulp rolls into the final boss with no levels in either, they're going to find it insanely hard and maybe even unfair. So that's why I think people are saying it's too hard. However, I don't think it's entirely the player's fault. I think FromSoft might have to take a bit of the blame here. To level up your Scooby-Doo blessing, you need to find these fragments. At first, only 1 is required to level up, then 2, then 3. This means there are a total of 50 fragments scattered across the map. The problem that's making people be underleveled is that there is no consistency on where you find these things. Now, it starts off well. You have these crosses scattered around the map which can be seen from pretty far away. NPCs will give you a map on where to find them, and they are guaranteed to have a fragment right next to them. That's good. However, the crosses only account for 13 fragments. That leaves 37 that you need to find in other places. And finding these 37 is like looking for a needle in the barbed wire trap from Saw, which is completely ridiculous, by the way. You can find a few in front of these statues, but the statues are pretty small, blend in with the background, and sometimes they'll give you a Fortnite emote instead. You may get one by killing a random hippo that doesn't even have a boss health bar. I guess they eated it. And get this, you might get one by killing the guys carrying the pots. And I'm like, really? The guys with the pots, they're losers. They don't even do anything. They look like every other enemy, but you're telling me they drop the single most important item in the game? Are you serious? And sometimes they don't drop it. Sometimes they drop a shitty crafting material. I look at this guy and think, ooh, the pot is sparkling. It's got to have 1, maybe even 2, and then it will just drop nothing. What's worse is that if you do find one, they aren't marked on the map. I think it would have been good if every time you found one, it would make a little symbol on the map saying, you found one here. Unlikely to be another one nearby. Because otherwise I'm just checking places I've already been to without realizing I've already been there. Another problem is the aura these fragments create is the same as a lot of other items. It's this purpley light, meaning from afar I may see this and think, okay, it could be the most important item in the game, or it might be a cookbook. I swear to God, I have picked up more cookbooks in the DLC than I have in the entire base game, nearly double the amount. Much like how the base game suffered from having not enough unique enemies to fill out the world, I think the DLC suffers from not having enough cool items to fill out the world. Don't get me wrong, the new weapons you can find are great. They added a hammer you can throw, like, look at this. But there just aren't enough. Meaning I'll go on a detour through a secret area in one of the dungeons and expect a nice reward, and it'll be a smithing stone, which by this point you will be able to buy for runes, and you will have the means to get an infinite amount of runes by killing the grey aliens again. Why do they drop so much money? I see an item in an area I can't reach, and I won't know if the reward for pulling my hair out not knowing how to reach it will be the item that increases your damage permanently, or if it will be Gordon Ramsay's Quick and Delicious. My god. An example of how I think this should be changed can be seen in the base game with the Sacred Tears. The Sacred Tears are also pretty imperative to get, but they are exclusively found in churches, which can be seen on the map if you look closely. They're like these rectangular buildings, plus they're marked on the map once you've visited them, so you know you've been there. That's so much better than what we currently have with the Erdtree fragments, and I think it would get rid of a lot of these bad reviews. And it's a shame because this is the easy part. What's hard is creating such a beautiful and detailed world with amazing characters and level design, and they completely nailed that. A few changes could make this DLC a lot less divisive, though even with a high level of the fragments you'll still find it really hard. Bosses are far more ruthless and have combos with 10 swings. Here's me fighting Rolana. I dodged like 9 swings of her combo, and the final hit of it did my entire health bar and killed me. It's evil at points, but it is definitely not too hard. And I'm saying this as someone who kinda sucks at Elden Ring. But anyway, my thoughts are, this is a huge and beautiful expansion that improves on a lot of the things that were already great about the base game. If you take your time, show the game respect, you will find a lot to love. There are some of my favourite bosses and areas in the whole game, and some really great new weapons, and it is driven by a story that I could actually follow at times. From me, this gets a pretty damn good out of 10, and the damn comes from the fact that you can spin on this stone. Isn't this awesome? Just try and tell me this game sucks, you can't. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for the support on the channel. What? 0 out of 10.